Do you sometimes feel exhausted and feel like you're failing even though you're objectively being successful? I feel like this is a common problem in our society right now. People work hard. They achieve more than most. They tick every single box that they make in their head, and still they feel empty and not content with their own achievements. They hate themselves, not openly, not like melodramatically, but quietly, in the form of relentless self-criticism. Have you ever spoken to someone who's like super successful, but they think so little of themselves? And you thought to yourself, how can you not see what I see? How can you not realize your own achievements? And how can you not be proud of yourself? Living this way, they never really rest, and they panic all the time over imperfection. They think deep down that they're not really good, that there's always something they could do to become better. They're just good at pretending, and they fake their way into their position, into their relationships, and that they don't own where they are. If this hits you, and if you could somehow relate to this, I need you to listen to this. Self-hatred does not come from doing things wrong. Often, it comes from doing everything right for the wrong reasons. So, first of all, no one is born hating themselves. You learned, usually from people who convinced you that love has to be earned. So this is called conditional regard or conditional love. It's when affection, attention, or even basic safety were only given to you when you performed, when you pleased, when you succeeded somehow. So you adapted. You learned to become useful instead of authentic. You became competent not because you loved yourself and because you actually wanted to, pursue certain things, but because being excellent, being over average, being admired by others was the only way for you to feel safe, to feel seen even. And what happens then is that your self-worth fuses with your output. And mistakes become not just evidence of failure in that certain task, but they become evidence that you are not good enough. And this is also when rest or when the absence of success and achievements start to feel like laziness, and you cannot enjoy your time off because you constantly need this reinforcement, you constantly need this approval for yourself that you are worth something. This is also probably why praise a lot of the times makes you anxious, because you think to yourself deep inside that if people really knew you, if they really knew how you achieved all those things, they wouldn't admire you at all. So this is perfectly normal. And it's not just emotional, it's neurobiological. Chronic self-hatred actually activates the default mode network, which is a part of your brain that loops negative self-talk, ruminates, and keeps on replaying same old shame narratives. So it's basically like a vicious cycle. Once you start having these negative thoughts about yourself and about the way that you're not worth anything if you don't achieve anything, this just gets amplified and looped over and over again. And a lot of the times this is paired with an overreactive amygdala, which is basically the part of your brain that is responsible for emotions. It's a very ancient part of the brain that is also seen in animals. And with the combination of this rumination and negative self-talk that is amplified over and over again by your default mode network, combined with the amygdala, which is overly reactive, which is what you feel when you are anxious, this really creates a very toxic cocktail of emotion. And basically your brain becomes wired for threat detection. It's sort of similar to a survival mode that is turned on. Your sympathicus is activated, and you you really try to avoid threat at all costs. And in this case, this threat that we're talking about here is imperfection, is failing. So your brain becomes overly scared of failure. It confuses failure with dying, essentially. And this creates what is called a shame-based identity, where who you are and what you do are never enough, no matter how much you achieve. So basically, instead of focusing on what you can do and what you can achieve, you're focusing on avoiding failure at all costs. This perfectionism is just fear wearing a mask. This is just perfectionism disguised. You don't chase it because you're greedy necessarily. You chase it because you're scared. You're scared of being exposed. And you fear that if you stop performing, you'll just disappear, which is absolutely irrational. But your brain, this is the way your brain is wired. If you've learned that love and, approval is tied to success. And so you become this high-functioning, secretly self-hating adult. Respected, admired, and productive, but miserable inside. And this is horrible. And the solution is not to just, stop trying to achieve things. This is not the solution at all. There's also productive ways of being successful. There can be discipline, there can be success without self-hatred. Those two are not inherently tied together, but you need to let go of this shame identity that I told you about. So what is the way out? How do we get out of this vicious cycle? Here's the paradox. You can't perform your way into self-worth, because this is what a lot of the times these people do, because you think, oh no, I realize I have this shame-based identity. I really need to fix myself. I really need to work so hard on getting rid of this. Do you see that this is the exact same thing, just on a different level? You can only reclaim your self-worth by confronting the lie that you had to earn it in the first place. Self-worth is not to be earned. It is inherently there. The fact that you exist makes you worthy. Period. Everything else, achieving things, relationships, your looks, those are things you can focus on, but they don't change anything about your worth as a human being. You have to trace that inner voice back to its source. Who made you feel like you had to be perfect to be loved? Who taught you that mistakes made you less valuable? And what did you internalize as truth that was actually just someone else's insecurity? And this is not easy. But the alternative is literally living your entire life trying to outrun a ghost and never feeling at home or at peace or content. Because maybe you've known this, I've been at a place in my life where I was like constantly chasing new goals, constantly climbing new mountains, and I could just not enjoy the view because I was always looking for the next thing, the next rush, because I had to keep my ego satisfied, because otherwise I didn't believe that I was worthy. So self-compassion is not a luxury. And a lot of the times, especially people in this self-help bubble, they're really, when you mention the word self-love or self-compassion, they're like, oh, go away with that stuff. It doesn't work. You shouldn't do that. But that's completely wrong. Self-compassion isn't indulgent. It's protective. And it's actually productive if you want to think about it in those terms. It reduces burnout, anxiety, and depression, and increases resilience, which is basically how well you can deal with hardships in your life. More than that, it interrupts the lie that says you're only worthy when you're flawless. So you should start there. When the voice in your head says you're not good enough, when you're failing, respond, you're not original. I've heard you before, and I choose not to believe you anymore because you're not the truth. The success is nice. I'm working towards the success. I'm trying to achieve those goals, but the outcome of this thing that I'm doing right now, it won't change anything about my self-worth. So, as the final takeaway, you don't hate yourself because you're broken. You hate yourself because you learned to confuse achievement with acceptance. And now it's time to unlearn that. You're not just what you produce, and you're not just what you fix. You're not just what they praised you for, you're also still worthy even when you rest or are passive or unproductive. And even when you fail, you're still lovable. And even when you don't know who you are yet, when you're kind of floating around, you're still lovable. And here's the paradox. When you realize this, these outputs or these outcomes, or at least this has been my experience, they will become better. When you stop really confusing failure with dying and let go of this extreme anxiety of failing, there's so much more mental capacity to actually go after your goals and do well. It becomes easier because it's not, live or die anymore. You kind of take out this emotional intensity. And this doesn't mean you lose passion. It just means that you lose a whole bunch of anxiety. So, you're enough, just as you are. That doesn't mean that you should stop chasing your goals. But don't confuse your success with your worth, because those two are separate. I hope you guys could take something from this video, and I see you guys in the next video.